Sure.
I just want to make sure I have the absence of this bigger number. I think we would need all 4 members to vote yes, because the absences technically count as no's.
Okay.
But it's not a requirement to abstain even if you weren't present for the meeting.
Okay.
So,
That's,
So, yes.
yeah, because we also have other items on the agenda. So.
we're good to go.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our April 13th iTalk meeting, our first meeting in almost 2 years in person. It's so nice to see everyone in person. Hope we can do this again. The last meeting I think we had in person was February 12th, 2020, and I wasn't even on the iTalk at that time, so this is my first in-person meeting, so bear with me as I learn the logistics of doing this in person. I'm not in the comfort of my home sitting there with my 2 screens, so. Okay, so before we get started, we do have our clerk, Carlos, and Carlos, yes, and he's going to share with us the rules for the interpretation, for the Spanish interpretation. Carlos, go ahead, please.
Good morning, buenos dias, and thank you, Chair. For our people joining on Zoom, I will begin with instructions in Spanish and then come back with instructions in English. Buenos días, estoy ofreciendo servicio de interpretación simultánea vía Zoom. Para hacer uso del servicio, por favor, desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles. Ahí haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o Español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, en celular, tableta, etcétera, presionaría los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Once again, interpretation is being provided for our Zoom participants. To use the feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. There, click on the interpretation icon, looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, or other mobile device, you would first press more, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. If you are joining us today at Sandag and need interpretation into Spanish or English, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. The headset looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece, which you can use to hear the meeting in Spanish. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpreter will come on automatically. Buenos días, si nos acompaña el día de hoy en la sala de juntas de Sandag y necesita interpretación al español, por favor diríjase a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. El receptor parece un pequeño iPod y puede utilizarlo para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. Gracias and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carlos. And for the record, clerk, please confirm that we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Very good. Okay, now Zara is going to explain how the public comment process will work. Zara, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair House. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you'll receive upon registering. When public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar on the right side of the screen. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you're participating by phone, press *9. The chair will call you by the last 3 digits of the telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you, Chair House.
Thank you, Zara. So let's get started. Our first item on the agenda is public comments. Are there any public comments, Clerk?
Thank you, Chair. We have no in-person or virtual public comments.
Very good. And for everyone's reminder, this is a dual, I guess, a hybrid meeting. We do have folks on the Zoom as well. So, okay, so with that, let's move on. Actually, are there any comments from the ITALK members? Anything else before we start? Perfect. All right, now we will go then to our second item on the agenda, and Mr. Andre Dujon will give us a report. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Chair House, and good morning, ITALK committee members. Good to see you again, all in person today. So I have a few updates I'd like to go over today. A lot going on in Sandag as normal. So this month, we are excited to kick off our Get Connected campaign supporting our digital equity strategy to ensure everyone has access to high-quality internet connection. We have also officially kicked off our outreach efforts for the Youth Opportunity Pass. Starting May 1st, everybody that's under the age of 18 will be able to ride transit free. We are partnering with MTS, NCTD, and the County of San Diego to launch the pilot program, and we'll then use the data, lessons learned from this to help inform our next regional plan. Chair Blakespear, Vice Chair Gloria, and Hassan traveled to Washington, D.C. last month to bring attention to the San Diego region's infrastructure needs. They highlight our major infrastructure projects, including transit to the San Diego airport, building the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, moving the low sand corridor off the bluffs, and bridging the digital divide. These trips are a huge part of how we are successful in being able to compete well and attract funding from the federal government. You may have heard that we received nearly $15 million in the latest federal bill. That was the second largest amount in the San Diego region. Also glad to announce that Sandag was awarded $1.5 million from Caltrans Sustainable Transportation grants last week. And these grants will help to implement the regional plan and turn many of our ideas into reality. Speaking of turning ideas into reality, we are excited to be moving forward on the Central Mobility Hub project. Working closely with our partners, we'll be starting the environmental process this year for the first part of the project, a transit connection to the airport, and moving forward with the location of the actual Central Mobility Hub downtown San Diego. We'll continue to partner with the Navy to ensure they are part of our regional transit plans in the future. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of moving this project forward. I also wanted to circle back on something that Ray Major shared with you at your last meeting regarding the loss of revenue that resulted from pay points not operating properly at the SR 125 last summer. The team has completed its review, and in coordination with the independent performance auditor, we have determined the loss to be approximately $1.8 million. Now, we do take our financial responsibilities seriously and have made management changes in response to what happened. In fact, I am, as a CFO, I'm also acting operations director for now until we recruit the position. The recruitment will go out probably later this week. We're also having an independent assessment completed to further inform our processes and practices going forward. We'll continue to update you on any further developments. We hope you'll consider joining us Saturday, April 23rd, as we will be celebrating the opening of the Landis Bikeway with a ribbon cutting ceremony and a community bike ride at 10 a.m. in the Park de la Cruz in San Diego. Our annual Bike to Work Day is coming up in May, so we are especially excited to be opening this brand new route in time to be used for the regional event. Lastly, the Otay Mesa East project, we will be bringing it to the ITALK next month as an informational item. We're actually going to the Transportation Committee and the board this month to give them an update on the financial plan and also how we intend to deliver the project as well. So that's something that I'm very excited about because there's a lot going on as far as the financial planning for that, and it's kind of coming to an end, or at least coming to a point that we can actually deliver this project. So we're very excited about that. With that, Chair House, that concludes my comments, and open for any questions if you may have any.
Thank you, Mr. Dijon. Are there any public comments on this item? Claire?
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay. Are there any comments from members of ITALK? Okay, by the way, I do want to point out there are several members of ITALK missing partly because of the unexpected nature of having to meet in person. So, but we wish them well and hope they could watch us at least on Zoom. So, okay, I do want to thank you and all staff, all Sandag staff, for the hard work that you're doing. I know you don't always get appreciated, especially in the media, but we know that you're doing great things, and you're putting really our transportation is in good hands with all of you at Sandag. So thank you very much for all your efforts. Okay, so let's move on. We have the consent item now, which is going to include voting on the minutes of the last meeting. We have the revised ITALK meeting calendar, and the reason we have that in here is because of a change in ITALK meeting schedule for June. It's going to be moved to June 14th. We have the annual regional transportation congestion improvement program funding programs, it's a mouthful, and also the draft schedule of ITALK meeting agenda topics. We always want to make sure we put that in advance so you can see what's coming up. Before I ask for a vote, is there any item, first of all, any public comments on this item before we vote?
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay. Are there any items that the members of ITALK would like to pull? Or are you okay with going ahead with the consent agenda?
No items that I'd like to pull.
Okay. I think you guys make sure you have your microphones on when you speak. Very good. Okay, so if that's the case, I would like to first of all ask for a motion and a second to approve these items, the consent agenda.
A motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please take a vote.
Thank you, Chair. Real estate right-of-way acquisition is absent. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Approve.
Contractor construction is absent. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Finance and budgeting is absent. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
Thank you. And for CEO private sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And that item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, so we move on now to item number 7, which is a report on actions by the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors. Ariana, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair House. I have 3 updates since your meeting in March. As you know, the board had approved a continuation of teleconference meetings for 30 days. That was at their meeting on March 11th. That resolution expired earlier this week. The board will be asked at its meeting on Friday, April 22nd, to make a determination about holding in-person meetings, and if approved, then at the discretion of the Sandag board chair, meetings could be conducted virtually for another 30 days. So we'll keep you posted. ITALK comments on the City of Carlsbad's active transportation program amendment request. You reviewed that at your last meeting. Those comments were shared with the Transportation Committee. There was an extensive discussion about the city's request and ensuring that the city make adequate progress toward ensuring TransNet recipients use, making sure that TransNet recipient agencies use their TransNet funds more efficiently. So similar comments, but that was approved. Then the draft Sandag program budget was approved by the board, and that included both the TransNet capital improvement program budgets that you saw at your meeting in March, and also your ITALK operating budget, which you recommended in February that the board approved. The final budget is scheduled for presentation to the board in May.
Thank you, Ariana. Are there any public comments on this one, Clerk?
Thank you, Chair. There are no public comments.
Okay. Are there any questions, comments by the members of ITALK? No? It's easy to see you all, so it's easier to know.
Should I raise my hand?
Yeah, raise your hand. Okay, so let's move on to item number 8, which is the FY21 TransNet Fiscal and Compliance Audit. Initial findings, as you recall from the last meeting, we were missing one city, Coronado. So Marcus Pascual, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair House, and good morning, members of the ITALK. I'm Marcus Pascual with the Finance Department, and will be introducing this item 8 before handing off to Kyle Haas, our auditor at Davis Farr, who is joining us virtually today. So just as a reminder, in accordance with the TransNet ordinance, the ITOC has the responsibility to conduct the annual fiscal and compliance audits of agencies that receive TransNet funds. ITOC is required to share the initial audit results and its recommendation to the Transportation Committee 60 days prior to its release to resolve any inconsistencies and technical issues. At the March 9th ITOC meeting, the ITOC accepted the initial results of the FY21 TransNet fiscal and compliance audits without exception to Coronado. However, Coronado needed more time to provide the draft due to staff turnover. So we are here today to provide the results of the Coronado draft as a separate item. So at this point, I will now turn it over to Kyle, who will be going over the results of the Coronado audit.
Very well. Go ahead, Mr.
Excellent.
Haas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcus. And I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak here. So we can go over the results of the Coronado audit this time. There was one finding and recommendation noted within this particular audit relating to the need to improve project timesheet tracking procedures. We noted that the city was unable to support staff time worked on projects included within the RTIP with proper timekeeping records. And as such, we obtained project milestone documentation and other deliverables to substantiate the payroll charges that were incurred for TransNet activity for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2021. Our recommendation to the city would be that they improve their timekeeping procedures in an effort to adequately support staff time incurred for projects included within the RTIP. Specifically, we recommend that the city implement TransNet project codes within their time entry system so that work completed for TransNet projects may be easily identifiable and ready and available for review. We did receive a response from the city of Coronado with regard to this finding, in which the city noted that they are in the process of implementing a new enterprise resource platform, which is inclusive of automated timekeeping functionality, and that the city expects to have that fully implemented in January 2023, and does expect that it should be able to further facilitate project tracking capability of staff time, including that which is spent on TransNet projects. In addition, the city did note that they will conduct regular quality assurance checks to ensure compliance and appropriate documentation of TransNet activity. So with the review of that, we do believe that those measures would be adequate to resolve the finding in future years. So with that, I will go ahead and turn this back over to Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Haas. Marcus?
Thank you, Kyle. So to summarize, Coronado is in compliance with all aspects of the ordinance with an administrative finding to improve timekeeping processes related to TransNet projects and will qualify to receive the full allocation of TransNet funds for FY22. Also, I want to make sure our new timeline for TransNet audits is known. Initially, we had planned to have the chair presentation to Transportation Committee at the April 1st meeting, but that has now been moved to the April 15th meeting 2 days from now. So on April 15th, ITOC chair presents initial results and findings of the audit to the Transportation Committee. On June 14th, ITOC is to consider acceptance of the final summary of results of the TransNet audit. And on June 24th, the board is to review audit results through the annual TransNet report item. So I will now turn it back over to Chair House for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Any comments from the members of ITOC? Any questions?
Quick question for the, so do most agencies bill to a job number or a project-specific account when they fill out their timesheets, or is this
Yes,
different?
most agencies do have that capability.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is an accept item, correct? So we need to vote, make sure that we vote to accept this report so it can be presented. May I have a motion from one of the members?
Sure, I'll make a motion to accept the report as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Yes, can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Could you please take a vote?
Thank you very much. Real estate right-of-way acquisition is absent. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Approve?
For contractor construction is absent. For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Finance and budgeting is absent. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve?
And for CEO private sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And that item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Mr. Haas, for a presentation. Moving on to number 9, item number 9, which is the Transit Extension Ordinance Funding Overview. And I understand Jim Miller and Ariana will be given that presentation. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair House. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off this presentation for you today. And then Jim is going to provide an updated forecast for TransNet revenues. And then from there, I'll go ahead and take it back and provide a presentation on how the funds are distributed and leveraged and some of the major accomplishments to date. Wrong gadget. Okay, so what is TransNet? Of course, you more than anyone know what TransNet is, but today's presentation is a combination of 2 presentations that we provided to our board recently on the updated TransNet revenue forecasts. Of course, again, as I mentioned, you know better than anyone what TransNet is, so today's focus will be on how the TransNet ordinance priority projects and programs are funded. Not just by the revenue generated by the sales tax measure, but also by outside sources that the region uses to leverage TransNet funding, which includes federal, state, and local funds. And then, as you know, in November 2004, 2/3 of voters approved the 40-year extension of TransNet, which generates funds for public transit, highway, local streets and roads. Sandra leverages these funds with state and federal resources to improve the region's transportation infrastructure. And since the extension took effect in 2008, SANDAG has partnered with Caltrans, MTS, the NCTD, the cities, to deliver critical infrastructure projects. We have an aggressive early action program known as the TransNet EAP, which all of you are familiar with, which funds a variety of high priority transportation projects and helped us accelerate those projects for the region. The region also delivered on habitat conservation, including land management projects, active transportation, and other grant programs. And as you know, the measure also mandated that an independent taxpayer oversight committee be established to provide an enhanced level of accountability and transparency for the expenditure of funds, and also to develop recommendations for improvements to the program. So I'll just remind everyone about the TransNet flow of funds. This shows how the funds are distributed across the various TransNet sub-programs per the ordinance language. In the black boxes at the top, you'll see the off-the-top programs, which include administration, ITALC, and the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Neighborhood Safety Program, also referred to as active transportation. The rest of the money is then distributed based on the percentages that you see here. So Jim's going to give the detail behind this slide, but I'll just share a high-level overview of what this information means. This slide intends to show graphically how much has been dispersed or committed to projects. The current long-term forecast for TransNet revenues indicates that between 2008 and 2048, we will have $13.3 billion that will be generated by the half-cent sales tax measure. 6.9 of that, which is shown on the top left, 6.9 billion of that, 13.3 billion has been dispersed or committed, and 6.4 is shown on the top right. That is the remaining revenue that's estimated to be collected between now and 2048 when the ordinance expires. And as a reminder, at your February meeting, we did bring sales tax revenue updates on the short term, but in the long term, and we did say that the revenues were up, which we also have an item for you at the end of your agenda today, where we're also talking about increasing our sales tax revenue forecast. But in the long term, we still have funding needs and challenges that will need to be met. and we will continue working together with all our partner agencies and all of you to continue to pursue additional funding for the region. But in terms of how much TransNet has been allocated to each sub-program since its inception, we can see that, for example, the major corridor highways and transit capital in the blue, that the region has allocated about $4 billion in just TransNet funding. And that's since 2008 when the ordinance went into effect. We can also see, for example, the local street and road program. The cities and the county have received $1.1 billion in TransNet to support delivery of their CIPs. And then the transit operators, they've received close to $870 million to support the delivery of transit services and operations. And we'll talk more about that through the presentation. So collectively, since 2008, the TransNet measure has benefited the region with about $6.9 billion allocated across all these various subprograms that you see here, augmenting the other funding that the region's operators, the local jurisdictions, and all TransNet recipient agencies receive from other sources. So I'm going to go ahead and take a step back and let Jim walk us through each of the slides that he has to share today.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. I'm Jim Miller, an economist here at Sandag. We'll take a little deeper dive into TransNet, basically by program. This is a graph you have probably seen before. These are TransNet revenues in 2020 dollars. And you can see that we are just now getting back to our 2006 peak of collections. And this was the forecast that was created back in 2002 when TransNet 2 was under consideration. And as you can see, for the first 5 or 6 years, the 2002 forecast actually did pretty well. We were tracking very well. Then came the Great Recession. And the Great Recession, as you'll all recall, really fundamentally changed the economy and the way people spend money. So it wasn't a dip in collections that was temporary. It really turned out to be kind of a shift downward in people's spending for taxable retail sales. As Ariana mentioned, we have seen some increased receipts in the last 18 months, but that doesn't really solve the long-term issue. This is our current forecast, down from $21.8 billion in 2020 dollars down to 13.3 roughly. We are going to amend that up a little bit, but again, the long-term vision that we're going to present today really remains basically a shortfall. And if you look at the trend line just from 2008 to now, the current forecast is basically a continuation of that. But that's not how we get to it. We actually have a consensus forecast. We buy 3 outside vendors' forecasts of taxable retail sales per capita. We apply that to the population that we expect in San Diego, and we get that population forecast from the Department of Finance, the State Department of Finance. So basically in the long term, this is a very conservative forecast. There's not much further down we feel we can go. So we don't expect any huge shortfalls, although one, given the Great Recession, COVID, war in Ukraine, one can never really tell too far into the future. So this is our funding pots. This is just translating from 2002 dollars to 2020 dollars. So I'll skip by it pretty quickly. And this is our TransNet flow of funds in 2020 dollars. You can see the updated forecast revenue is in column C, the 13.3 billion that we discussed. And then in D is the total disbursements so far, about 3.7 billion. So in column E, you would say we have 9.7 left. However, column F shows that we have debt service and otherwise committed funds of about 3.2. So we really have committed about $6.9 billion and have about 6.4 remaining. And I'm going to show you where all that 6.4 ends up. I'm going to start with what we call our pass-through expenditures. These are funds that we collect through TransNet and just basically allocate to other agencies, starting with the local streets and roads, which we allocate to the jurisdictions. You can see that about 3.7 billion of total revenue that we're expecting long-term, and we have about 2.6 billion left in that. For transit service improvements, that's 16.5% of TransNet that goes directly to our transit service operators. We're expecting 2.1 billion long-term in total revenue. About 1.5 of that remains. Another pass-through is our Smart Growth Incentive Program, expecting to collect about 270 million in total revenue, of which we have about 220 million left. And our TransNet bike and pedestrian revenues also are 2% at about 270 million. And we have about 277 million that we are expecting to collect through the remainder of the program. Now we get into bike and pedestrian a little more in detail. In 2013, the board directed us to the Early Action Program, which accelerated the building of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So you can see that we bonded against future proceeds. So we expect to collect 270 million in total revenue, but we really committed about 260 of that. So we have about 8 million remaining to collect that is not spoken for the program through the entire rest of the program. That, again, with forecast, that could change a little bit, but basically, because we've put these programs into action, we don't have as much flexibility in the future. The same is true for our environmental mitigation program. We're expecting to collect about $800 million in environmental program revenues over the life of TransNet 2. But as you can see, we have bonded against that, again, to take action while it was advantageous for us to protect lands for the environment. We've committed about 713 million of that, and that leaves about $80 million remaining. And again, most of that revenue that is remaining will trickle in over the life of the program. So it's not as if we have 80 million right now we could spend on anything. That's money that'll be coming in primarily after really 2035. That's true for this program and for most of the other programs as well. And then there's the major corridor revenues. That's 4.9 billion total, roughly, that we expect to collect. And again, because we have done so much work to this point, building the mid-coast, putting in highway expansions, pouring a lot of concrete, we have bonded and committed about 4 billion of that 4.9 billion that we expect to collect. And again, you can see with the blue dotted line, the difference between the blue and green. Most of the remaining revenues really come in after, say, 2035. So we have about 900 million expected, but again, we don't have all that in hand right now and won't for quite a long time. This is new major corridor transit operations, the 8.1% that goes to the transit operators to fund certain specific programs that were laid out in TransNet. That includes the Superloop, the Rapids, the Midcoast, and in frequency increases in the coaster. Those are things that we've already implemented. We're also expecting to implement further frequency increases and other rapid bus services. So currently we've collected about 150 million more than we've doled out to our transit operators. But really starting right about now, we will, because of the Midcoast coming online, we will start expending more than we're collecting on an annual basis. So we're expecting to collect about $1 billion for this pot of money for our transit operators and those specific transit services. But we're expected that if we were to fully fund those projects with 8.1% funds, we would need $1.6 billion. So we have quite a shortfall there. And even if we were to limit to the existing services, what we're supporting, we would still need about 1.17 billion, which again leaves us with a $0.56 billion gap to the fully fund those programs, and a $0.13 billion gap if we were to just fund existing services. Now, those 8.1% funds, I want to stress, were intended to support those transit services. It was never promised that it would fully fund them. And again, with TransNet collecting less money in the long term than was expected to collect 20 years ago, you can see that we do have a shortfall here, and we're working with our transit operators to identify other places where we can fill these gaps with them. So there again is our summary, the remaining funds available by category. Now I hand it back to Ariana. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about what we've accomplished. TransNet is a success story, as you all know. TransNet dollars leveraged with state and federal funds have helped to pay for upgrades to the region's highways, transit services, bike, local roads. We've built 20 miles of the I-15 Express Lane, I-5 North Coast Corridor, extension to the trolley, the Coaster Commuter Rail Line. We've acquired about 9,000 acres for habitat conservation in the region. We've provided discounted transit passes for disabled people, seniors, students. We've built the Mid-Coast Trolley, which just opened recently. More than 800 local street and road projects have been built with local allocations. And then we have your bike and pedestrian improvements as well, including projects such as the Bayshore Bikeway, the I-15 commuter bike facility, the Inland Rail Trail, and others. So what comes next? Let me just scroll through here. I think that's everything. So just a recap of where we've been. The ITAC conducts triennial audits, performance audits, as you all know, and you've developed recommendations for improvements to the program consistent with your role. The board also conducted a 10-year review in 2019, and they also included recommendations to improve the program going forward. The ordinance, as you know, requires consistency with the regional plan, and we all know the 2021 regional plan was a major overhaul, a major update, so that requires the expenditure plan in the ordinance to be consistent to ensure with the ordinance to ensure that revenue can be made available to the projects. We're also, we're taking the results of the ITAC audits, the board's 10-year review, the updates to the regional plan, and then we are consolidating that into a package of potential amendments. Starting in November, we began our series of presentations, and then in December, Ray Major provided an update on the revenue forecast, which we're sharing with you today. And then the board had asked our transit operators to work together with Standag to come up with a plan, as Jim mentioned, to help deliver on the transit service and operations commitments made in light of revenues coming in lower than originally anticipated. So we're taking a very thoughtful, careful approach, making sure that we're evaluating the impacts of any potential changes. And now we're here today sharing what we've shared with the board and looking for your feedback as well. So Jim shared the slide with you. We heard that the amount remaining is 6.4 billion. That's only one piece of the funding puzzle. However, the next thing we want to share with you are the other funds that help make all the projects under these sub-programs possible, which help augment the local TransNet revenues that the region receives, and so that we can continue delivering on our commitments and implement the vision laid out in the regional plan. Again, continued collaboration with our partners is going to be key and critical to maximizing the leveraging opportunities and bringing much needed resources to the region. So with that, I'm going to go through each of the sub-programs to share a bit about the additional revenues that help fund each of these. Before I do that, though, I did want to mention, and Jim did allude to it, that as we walk through each of these slides, we just have to really keep in mind that the amounts that we're sharing in terms of remaining funding available is through the life of the program. So through 2048, again, it doesn't mean that we have the money sitting in a bank right now ready to use. So just something to keep in mind as we go through these. So the first one we want to cover is the major corridors. The major corridors capital project section of the ordinance, you'll see at the top in green, 38% is allocated out of the total pot toward this bucket of funding. There's about 4 billion that has been dispersed or committed. That's shown in the purple, representing about 82%. The remaining amount is about 866 million remaining in this category. And in terms of additional outside sources of funding that contribute to this section, there's a wide variety shown in the list on the right-hand side of the slide. So those make up about 70% and are shown in the blue, and TransNet represents about 30% or so shown in green. You can see that some of the additional funding sources include federal funding like FTA or Federal Transit Administration, federal highway dollars. We have state programs such as Cap and Trade. We have RMRA, the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation, which is the same as SB1, and local funding as well. The Major Corridor Environmental Mitigation Program, or EMP. This is another bucket, and this bucket is used to fund direct expenditures for mitigation of the major corridor projects. This bucket amounts to 4.4% of the overall program, as you can see at the bar at the top in green. It's also considered part of the major corridors bucket, though, so the 38% bucket that we just reviewed. And the funding within this program, as I mentioned earlier, has been used to acquire about 9,000 acres. That's more than 5 times the size of Balboa Park. And that helps to demonstrate how we have proactively protected and conserved the environment while also responsibly delivering critical transportation projects for the region. So given our current revenue projections, we are projecting that we will be short by about 113 million for this pot. This will need to be paid for by the major corridors capital program, because this part is considered a part of the overall major corridors pot. On the earlier slide, we showed you the remaining balance in our major corridors was 866 million. When you subtract this 113, the remaining amount for both is 753 million. So in addition to TransNet, the agency uses other federal funds such as congestion mitigation, air quality, and regional surface transportation funding, federal funding, as well as TransNet, of course, which is contributing the majority and shown in green here. For the local street and road program, 29.1% of TransNet funds, as shown at the top, is allocated to this pot. So far, 1.1 billion has been dispersed or committed, and that's passed through directly to our local jurisdictions based on the methodology, which we've shown here in the lower right-hand corner. You can see of the total funding available through 2048, 30% has been dispersed, and that's shown in purple, 70% is remaining. And again, I'll just take this opportunity to remind everybody that doesn't mean we have 2.6 billion sitting in a bank somewhere, but rather that'll be available through the life of the ordinance. So here you can see the allocations by jurisdiction to date, totaling the 1.1 billion. You can also see the detail in terms of other fund types that the local jurisdictions use to get these projects funded. So they use everything from their developer impact fees to general fund monies. And with that, they've been able to deliver and complete hundreds of projects for the region that include new major roads, repaved streets, pothole repairs, local bikeway, and sidewalk improvements, among many others. And just like the major corridors has an EMP provision, so does the local streets and roads. It also has an EMP provision. And this one gets 2.1% of the net funding available. 37 million in TransNet has been dispersed or committed so far, representing the 16% shown in purple, with about 194 million remaining in this pot. And it's important to note just that the EMP is a lockbox provision, meaning it cannot be changed by a 2/3 vote of the commission, but rather would need to go to a vote of the people for any changes. So for transit services, there's 2 pots of funding for transit. One is for, this one is specifically for transit services like reduced fares for seniors, disabled youth. And then I'll talk about the other funding pot, which is for operations, in a minute. But for this pot, the ordinance provides 16.5% of the overall funding available for transit services. 608 million has been dispersed or committed. The remaining amount is 1.5 billion, again, to be collected through the end of the ordinance. For new major corridor transit operations, so the ordinance helps support transit operations by allocating 8.1%. That's just funding for new major corridor or expanded major corridor projects such as the Midcoast. So a total of 131 million in TransNet has been dispersed or committed, and the total amount of remaining is forecast to be 905 million, or 87%, which you can see in the gray color on the pie chart. And again, this is through the life of the ordinance. We've been collecting these monies since 2008 when the ordinance went into effect, and we've been banking these funds while new services come online. While we continue to collect revenues under this pot, as Jim mentioned, we are projecting spending it more quickly than it is coming in. So even though we get a lot of this funding and spend it every year, by 2030, we know it won't be enough to cover just because of the way that the funding in this bucket is being distributed. So those discussions are happening with our transit operators and our board leadership to come up with a solution for funding this provision. In terms of other funds used for both transit services and operations, this one shows the other funds that are used by MTS and NCTD to complement TransNet funding. The TransNet funding shown in red and purple. It's important to note here that the majority of the funding, again, shown in the blue, comes from the additional funding sources such as the state's TDA and STA programs. And in particular, TransNet makes up just 12% for MTS and 14% to NCTD. This is your Bicycle Pedestrian and Neighborhood Safety Program, or BPNS. And this, the total funds dispersed and committed are approximately 258 million, shown in purple. And this also includes debt service for borrowing. We also have an early action program, as Jim mentioned, for the bike program. That means that about 97% of the funding under this provision has already been dispersed or committed, leaving only 3%. But this funding has been used to advance projects such as the Bayshore Bikeway, the Sweetwater Bikeway, Inland Rail Trail, the Coastal Rail Trail, the SR15 Commuter Bikeway, and others. And then the ordinance provides 2% for this bucket off the top. Additional fund sources that contribute include the state's active transportation program, RSTP, TDA. We have the cap and trade transit and intercity rail capital program, as well as SB1 dollars. And then the Smart Growth Incentive Program, last but not least, this includes 2.1% of the overall pot, which is set aside. This provides funding for transportation-related infrastructure that helps better integrate transportation and land use. Approximately 47 million has been dispersed or committed. The remaining is 222 million. Other funds that complement this one are federal, local, general fund, et cetera. So to wrap up, we just wanted to share in terms of where we're at today in an effort to continue improving transparency and delivering on the region's commitments. SANDAG and partner agencies continue working together to secure additional outside funding. And that's in recognition of the fact that TransNet was meant to support and not fully fund all projects and programs in the ordinance. And of course, we will continue working with our partner agencies, with our board, and with you to continue ensuring the financial integrity of the TransNet program.
Okay.
With that, we can help answer questions.
Thank you, Ariana and Jim. Are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you, Clerk. Questions, comments from the committee?
I had two, if I can.
Please go ahead.
So on page 7, you guys showed that $113 billion, excuse me. I forget if it's million or billion deficit for the EMP. And then I believe you explained that it would be covered by the major corridors. Did I get that correct? Does that affect the major corridors? Like, is that money that should have been used for major corridors and now is all of a sudden being used by EMP?
So when the board established the Major Corridor Early Action Program back in 2005, right? So they issued bonds against future sales tax revenues, knowing that they could accelerate and get benefits, right, from building the projects earlier. Not only would they be cheaper, but people would be able to, use them sooner. As part of that action, they recognized that the advanced mitigation would have to happen at the same time. So it was part of the board action to look at those two funding pots as one.
Thank you. And then my other question, just curiosity, on page 40, there was the percentage of revenues for the transit operators. I was just curious which one represented fares? Like, is it
It is.
smallest percentage? Probably.
I do have that, though. I do have something about that.
And,
I think it's
and if you
12 or
don't know, it's okay. It's
14%.
just
It is actually interesting to note. I've got that somewhere here.
NCTs, isn't that zero, is it?
Transit, here we go. So the passenger fares are 33% for MTS, 19% for NCTD. So yeah, 33% and 19%. So the top right quadrant. So yeah, it's substantial.
Yeah, more than I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all I got.
Yes.
Other questions?
I have no questions.
Les?
Yeah, I have several. So,
Good.
and some in general and some specific, but I'll just start with the general one. Regarding the potential additional funding, everybody's watching for the infrastructure bill and the trickle down, and every local agency in the state is already trying to figure out what they're going to do. Have there been any studies by Sandag on what those dollars potentially could look like for the MPOs, in particular here in Southern California?
So we're still waiting for the verdict on that, and patiently, very patiently, we're eager to have more information at our disposal. So we are part of a statewide working group. There are many sub-working groups where our staff is also participating to get some of the newer programs up and running. I don't have the amount yet, that I could share, but that maybe we have a little bit of
And we're also, we have a schedule of when all the competitive programs are coming out. And so our grants application team is preparing what projects will be going after in those competitive pots. Clearly, we need to have some local dollars in order to leverage those outside dollars. So that really is where we have a challenge currently, is coming up with those local dollars. And if we had more local dollars, then we could leverage that further.
Thanks, Susan. Second question, just on the committed funds, on a couple of the programs like the environmental program and the bike program are almost completely committed through the life. Number one, that means we're bonding or, other financial ways to pay for that. Does the amount that's committed include all the debt service for that?
Yes.
I assume it does, but I just wanted to clarify that. And then the second question is just a general question regarding the regional plan. If we're 95% committed on the projects, I guess I'm trying to figure out vis-a-vis the final regional plan, are we 95% of the projects implemented or in progress, or where does that sit compared to where the final goal is?
So in the regional plan, the TransNet funds only account for roughly 6 to 8% of the revenue that supports all those projects. So it's a tool that we use, but it's not the only funding source. So in the regional plan, there's probably about 35 to 40 different fund types coming from the state and coming from the feds. So no, TransNet is only a small piece of what will eventually fund our regional plan.
I have a couple questions as well. First of all, on the bike program, you show that you have 8 million left of TransNet. And I know you have other funds. So how does the early action plan fit into that? Are you able to finish that program? Are there changes to be made because of funding issues?
So when the board established the bike early action program in 2013, I think the board anticipated, staff anticipated being able to complete the projects in the early action program within about 10 years. I think that comes up, I think, in 2024. So, I mean, we look at the health of the program on a regular basis. We we put together a plan of finance, which we bring to you, and we anticipate bringing to you in the next few months as well, where we evaluate kind of the funding constraints and any additional capacity that we might have. So those are some of the tools that we use to continue to stay on top of the bike program. Of course, our grants team is working feverishly to get as much outside money and remain competitive and put our best foot forward in terms of outside grant opportunities through the state, right? We have the state's active transportation program. The governor's budget includes, I think it's like $500 million to additionally fund the active transportation program at the state level, which we hope to also be able to tap into. So continue looking, IIJA at the federal level also includes some active transportation sources that we'll be able to tap into. So it's about looking at every possibility, every funding source opportunity, and cobbling together all those funds to make them happen.
Okay, so there is a possibility, though, if you're not able to find those funds, that program may get revised. Is that possible?
Or delayed, right? I mean, that's kind of the annual process of looking at the projects within the program and seeing if certain projects need to be delayed, others need to be higher priority.
Okay. That applies to really everything else. I see that your biggest commitments are to the local roads, to transit, both operations and CIP and all that, which is, beyond just what Sandag is doing, as a MPO agency or delivering other types of projects. So if you are not able to, again, provide the funding through all these sources that you're going, does that mean that then the TransNet ordinance, as we have today, with all the projects that were listed, will get revised, or some kind of an amendment needs to happen and reduce maybe, or delay, like you say? Also keeping in mind that you have the whole regional plan, which needs much more funding than that. But what would happen to transit projects? How would you decide, since you have all these other commitments besides what we said about highways and all these different things that need to be done? How would that work?
Yeah, so the ordinance requires consistency with the regional plan, so we do have to update to be consistent with that to start. In addition, I would just say, we do go through the same process, right? Taking a look at the entire program health. Okay. If there are areas that need to be looked at more closely to see, whether certain projects need to be delayed. There are other agencies, other MPOs that do a complete revision of their ordinance, right, on a regular basis when they realize that they can't afford the whole program. So that's one option, right? We could do that. Or we could take a more optimistic approach and, we have a list of projects and not tell ourselves no, but rather, we have this list of projects and, as funding opportunities come up, we take advantage of those. Okay. So the board will have some options to consider.
But what would be the process? Is that still a board vote, basically? Or do you have to go back to the public to revise the program as it was written in the ordinance?
Yeah, the board has, so the board acting as the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission has the authority to amend the ordinance as long as it's not a lockbox provision within the ordinance, which would have to go for a vote of the people to be amended.
Okay. All right. No more questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on to item number 10, which is the 2021 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. We have actually two amendments in item 10 and 11. So we have Mr. Ratcliffe going to give us the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ITALK members.
Can I ask a quick, just what page is item number 10 on the agenda? And so I can jump there.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, the bad thing about
I think it's 531
iPad is
sounds
hard.
right.
We can't jump over to, 531. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So item 10 is Amendment 10 to the 2021 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. On April 15th, the Transportation Committee is expected to approve Amendment 10. The ITALK is being asked to provide feedback on this proposed amendment, focusing its review on the TransNet-funded projects. Amendment 10 is a regular quarterly amendment that's being processed to accommodate changes to projects in the SANDAG FY22 program budget, as well as some changes requested by local agencies. Attachment 1, beginning on page 533 of today's agenda, is the summary of changes report showing prior and revised project cost, the cost difference, and the percent change in each project. The table has been sorted in descending order by the absolute value of the change in dollars. There's not really any significant changes in this amendment. Most of the changes were made by local agencies that revised their program TransNet across their program of projects. And in attachment 2, beginning on page 536, you'll find those proposed changes, specifically for the projects funded with TransNet. Each project lists TransNet at the top, followed by any other funding programmed on the project. The tables will also show the TransNet subtotals and other subtotals to show you how much TransNet and other funds are programmed. Attachment 3 shows any changes that were made during the public comment period. And attachment 4 is the TransNet programming analysis that shows the changes in LSI programmed between this amendment and the previous formal amendment. In this case, the last formal amendment was Amendment 8, which was presented to the ITALK at the January 12th, 2022 meeting. The second table in this attachment shows how agencies are working towards programming more of their LSI and their LSI carryover. And finally, attachment 5 summarizes the TransNet eligibility requirements analysis for Amendment 10. That concludes this report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe. Okay, are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you, Clerk. Any comments from the members of ITALK? Okay, this is just a discussion item, so please go ahead to item number 11.
Thank you, Chair. Item 11 is Amendment 11 to the 2021 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. And on April 15th, the Transportation Committee is expected to recommend that the Board of Directors approve Amendment 11 at its April 22nd meeting. The ITALK is asked to provide feedback on this proposed amendment, focusing its review on the TransNet-funded projects. Amendment 11 is a formal amendment that's being processed to accommodate the FY 2023 Regional Transit Capital Improvement Program. Attachment 1, beginning on page 573, is the summary of changes report showing the prior and revised project cost, the cost difference, and the percent change in each project. The table has been sorted in descending order by the absolute value of the change in dollars. The key changes in this amendment include the programming of federal fiscal year 2023 FTA funds that the transit agencies will be applying for, and the programming of TransNet revenues based on the estimates that were approved by the SANDAG board on 2/25. In attachment 2, beginning on page 574, you'll find the changes proposed in this amendment, specifically for the projects funded with TransNet, with the project showing TransNet at the top, followed by the other funding types programmed on the project. Attachment 3 shows the changes that were made during the public comment period. And finally, attachment 4 summarizes the TransNet eligibility requirements analysis for Amendment 11. And that concludes this report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any public comments?
No, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from my top members? Okay, all right, thank you for the report. So noted and received. Okay, we are moving on to item number 12, which is TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program funding recommendations. Jenny Russo and Tracy Forshaw. Welcome, ladies.
Good morning, Chair House and board
Good
members.
morning.
It is nice to see everybody in person again.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me introduce myself again. I'm Tracy Forshaw, the program manager for the Smart Growth Incentive Program. I have here with me Jenny Russo, who is the manager for the Grants Division. And she's here to help me answer any questions that you might have after my presentation. So let's go ahead and start. First slide. Thank you. So I'm happy to talk to you today about the funding and grant opportunities available through the Smart Growth Incentive Program, SGIP, Cycle 5 Call for Projects. Before doing so, I would like to give you a brief overview of the Smart Growth Incentive Program goals and objectives, accomplishments, and how the program is funded. So you see here on this slide, the TransNet Extension Ordinance and Expenditure Plan, which was approved by voters in 2004, includes the funding for the TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program. And this is approximately 2.1%, as you have seen from a previous item from the flow of funds on TransNet. Sandag's TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program provides funding to the region's 18 cities and the county of San Diego to support regional initiatives consistent with the San Diego Forward 2021 Regional Plan. The Sustainable Communities Strategy and support smart growth and transit priority areas. Key objectives of the program include creating great places, making improvements to the community, and providing incentives promoting the use of compact, mixed-use development in smart growth opportunity areas. The program helps improve the health and quality of life of local communities. Since the program was launched, 4 funding cycles have helped create more walkable, bike-friendly, and transit-oriented communities. The SGIP has awarded more than $55 million in TransNet funds throughout the San Diego region, funding a total of 67 projects. Next slide. Thank you. The SGIP is a competitive grant program and ranks grantees based on information provided through their application and consistency with the goals and objectives established in the application process. So this brings me to why I'm here today. At your November 10th, 2021 meeting, ITALC recommended that the Board of Directors approve evaluation criteria and release the call for projects for the 2021 TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program planning. In mid-November of last year, the Board of Directors approved the Cycle 5 SGIP call for projects to be released. So total funding was $3 million with a maximum award of $500,000. Funding matches were not required, but points were awarded based on evidence of matching funds. The call for projects also outlined some eligible projects and what funding could be used for. And we have some examples highlighted on this slide. Mobility and housing studies, mixed-use overlay zones, specific plan updates. I will also note that this call for projects only included funding for planning projects, as it was released simultaneously with the Housing Acceleration Program planning grants, as both programs complement each other. It is anticipated that a larger SGIP call for projects will be released later this year, which will include both planning and capital components. And lastly, grantees will have expenditure deadlines of up to 36 months from their notice to proceed. This is the timeline to show you where we are at with the Cycle 5 call for projects. Last year, November, the Standag Board of Directors approved the release of the call for projects. In December, we held a virtual pre-proposal workshop along with the Cycle 1 Housing Accelerator Program call for projects to discuss project eligibility, submittal process, evaluation criteria, and to answer any potential applicants' questions regarding the call. Grant applications were closed on February 8th of 2022, and the eligibility and evaluation process began. Today, we are bringing staff recommendations to you for review of the projects recommended for funding to ensure consistency with the TransNet ordinance. In May, staff will seek recommendation from the RPC, Regional Planning Committee, and approve the Board of Directors to award funds and execute grant agreements. Next slide. Oh, you got it already. You're ahead of me already. So on to who applied. The SGIP received 5 applications. As noted in the report, there were 2 applications from the housing HAP call for projects that was not recommended for full funding under that particular program, but which we were able to thankfully recommend funding under the Smart Growth Incentive Program. So that's some good news. So for a total of 7 applications received under this program. Staff is recommending 5 projects for funding, and the map shows the 5 different jurisdictions. Jurisdictions not on this map who applied to the SGIP call for projects are the cities of Chula Vista and San Marcos. Unfortunately, we were not recommending these for award under this particular program, as the project's applications did not meet eligibility requirements, as they did not demonstrate a direct connection between the project activities and furthering the goals of the Smart Growth Incentive Program. The good news here is these projects are great projects still and would be eligible and very competitive applications under an active transportation grant, such as the state ATP administered through Caltrans, which it just came out with their applications, and they're due, I guess, in June. So staff has reached out to the city's project staff to recommend that they apply. Okay, next slide. So this table shows the 5 project applicants that are recommended to move forward for funding. All projects recommended for funding are aimed at furthering the goals and objectives of the Smart Growth Incentive Program. To meet the grant eligibility criteria, they also met minimum scores that were used as part of the evaluation criteria. So as you can see from this slide, projects funded range from $175,000 to full funding award of $500,000. 5 projects here totaling approximately $1.9 million. Attachment 1 of the report also shows the local match of $2.2 million that these local jurisdictions are helping us leverage to bring a total investment to the San Diego region of $4 million. And you can also see the project descriptions on that attachment. The ITALC is asked to review and discuss the proposed TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program planning projects recommended for funding to ensure consistency with the TransNet ordinance. And that concludes my report. And as I said before, I have Jenny here with me, and we are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Fershaw. Are there any public comments on this particular item?
We have no public comments on this item.
Very well. Any questions, comments from ITALC members? Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, just help me remember. when you say consistency with the TransNet ordinance, how would you define that so that I don't go off on something that doesn't matter, or I wouldn't look at something that didn't really pertain?
So I do have the TransNet ordinance language here for smart growth. To assist local agencies in better integrating transportation and land use, such as enhancements to streets, public places, funding of infrastructure needed to support development in smart growth opportunity areas, consistent with the regional comprehensive plan and community planning efforts related to smart growth and improved land use transportation coordination. That was a big mouthful.
That's exactly what I thought it was too. No, my assumption is you guys already reviewed it for that, and
We
these
did,
would
but
not come
we're
forward
bringing
if
this
they did
to
not
you.
meet.
Yes, we did. We're bringing this to you for a high-level overview of, how it relates to the TransNet ordinance. And like I said, project descriptions are on the attachment 1 for each project that we're recommending for award.
I have, if I can, just a curiosity question. So for example, the San Diego State University or University of California, San Diego, or any of the universities, can they apply for these funds, or do the cities that they reside in apply for the funds and include them on the planning part?
I would say the latter, you're correct there. It's the jurisdictions that can apply. However, and then for smart growth, you have to be in an SGOA, a smart growth opportunity area. We do have 7 types of smart growth opportunity areas, and one is a special use, which is the universities.
Is there potential for those? How do the smart growth areas get identified? And is there the potential that new ones will come online?
Great question. Yes, the smart growth opportunity areas were identified by the city's planning directors. That's our regional technical working group. It's made up of the regional planning directors for the 18 cities in the county. And then we also have advisory advisors as well on that board. We will become, it's yes, like you said, it's going to be a more of a fluid, like we might be changing to more towards transit priority areas. So the map might change, but yes, for right now, that's what they're.
Thank you very much. That's all I got.
Any other questions?
2 short ones. So you had 7 applicants, 2 fell out, and 2 you helped kind of revise. So is that what happened there? Okay.
Yes.
I didn't see any timelines associated. What are they? How long does it take to do a general plan update these days? What would the expectation be?
They do have up to 3 years for planning projects to get completed. However, most planning projects do complete a little bit before their 3 years is up. I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question? Sorry.
Well, it looks like National City is going to be busy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just wondering, what would be the timeline associated with expending 1.8 million on a general plan update?
Yeah, so policy 35 is what governs our grant programs, our competitive grant programs here at Sandag. And it does give us timelines for planning grants that have to be done, I believe, in 3 years, so 36 months.
Thank you.
Very well. I have a couple of questions as well. Remind me, what was your budget for this year for given these grants? Was there a budget to begin with?
So the total amount available, like that we offered, was 3 million.
Okay.
Strictly restricted to planning projects only, because we've got this housing acceleration funding that we have to give out as well.
Okay, so out of the 3 million you've given, you're going to basically distribute 1.9 million.
Correct.
What's the average number of applicants you typically get? Is 5 or 7 average, or maybe you can expand on that?
It's kind of a hard question because it depends on what is going on in the jurisdiction level. This is a bit low for us. I mean, we traditionally offer planning and capital at the same time. We do know a lot of the cities have staff shortages. We've heard from a few of them specifically that don't have the capacity either to take on a project or to work on an application. We're also seeing a shift where a lot of the jurisdictions really need capital money, not planning money. So that's the other reason why we predict that this is down. It's not alarming to me at all. I mean, we've heard from several of the jurisdictions that we know this is here. When are you going to be pushing out capital dollars? So that residual that's left is going to go back into the program. And when we offer the larger pool later this fall, we'll probably see an influx of applications, which is more of what we're used to.
So you're really not leaving money on the table. You're basically moving it to a different fund.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. That's good. I hate to see money sitting there and people can't use it because they don't have the time to fill out an application or something like that.
No, they can use it.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much for that presentation.
All right.
We'll move on to item number 13, which is FY 2018 and 21 triennial performance audit updates. And I'm looking forward to this item because it's been a little while since we've heard about it.
Thank you,
Zara,
Chair
please
House.
go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Today's item is an update on the progress being made toward implementation of recommendations from the two most recent TransNet triennial performance audits conducted by the ITOC, the FY 2018 and FY 2021 audits. The ITOC conducts these performance audits every 3 years using the services of an independent performance auditor to review project delivery, cost control, schedule adherence, and related activities, and to make recommendations that could improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the expenditure of TransNet revenues. The FY 2021 performance audit concluded that SANDAG completed many major corridor projects as intended by the ordinance. In addition, the audit found that SANDAG was generally compliant with TransNet provisions. The FY 2018 performance audit mostly found SANDAG and its TransNet partners were on track toward meeting TransNet's primary goals. Both the FY 2018 and FY 2021 performance audits included 26 recommendations each, and all were categorized into 4 rankings: critical, high, medium, and low priority based on each recommendation's impact on TransNet program goals and SANDAG responsibilities. To date, 11 recommendations of the FY 2018 performance audit have been completed in addition to 3 that have been partially completed. The remaining recommendations of the FY 2018 audit, as well as the 26 recommendations of the FY 2021 audit, are in the progress of being addressed. That concludes our presentations, and the staff is available to help answer any questions that the ITOC might have.
Okay, thank you, Zara. Are there any public comments on this item?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, members of ITOC, are there any questions, comments? Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Just curious, of the remaining,
You want to be closer to it.
of the remaining goals or recommendations, I should say, do we know a percentage of which ones are high, which ones are low, or do we hit all the highs yet? Or the critical ones?
I can try to, we can get back to you on that one, maybe put a little spreadsheet together, but I would just say for the FY18, it's mainly the recommendations that are tied to the overall theme of the audit from FY18, which was that SANDAG should establish a transportation performance management framework to better measure progress against ordinance goals. And so there's a number of recommendations that tie back to that one. And I'll just say that, at the time when the audit was conducted, it was acknowledged by the ITOC and staff that those recommendations from that FY18 were going to take longer to implement. You probably remember, because we were waiting for, they hinge a lot on the adoption of the 2021 regional plan. We knew that was going to be a major update at the time. We knew that we needed to wait and have that regional plan adopted before we could start implementing some of these that are heavier lift audit recommendations. So yeah, so just kind of wanted to say that, yeah, we can put that together though for you.
Anything else? I do have a question. The spreadsheet that you provide, the worksheet that you provided, that was primarily for 2018, correct? Does that have both? 2020 has both?
Both, there's two spreadsheet, two attachments, one for FY18 and one for 21.
Okay, all right. I guess it was tough for me to distinguish between the two. Is there a title or something on these so we kind of know?
Yeah, I actually, when I printed it out, I realized that we don't have a header, so we
Okay.
need to add that. Yeah.
All right, that would be great. Okay, and I know the next item is an update to the major component of 2018. There was a committee established to kind of follow up on this, and we haven't had, or subcommittee, and we haven't really had a follow-up. So maybe at some point, it would be nice to have that discussion among the subcommittee, just kind of keep a little closer eye on how things are going, so we can make sure it gets done. I don't know what timeline you have for completion. Is there a timeline for 2018?
Yeah, I would say for both audits, our goal usually is to complete the audit recommendations before the next audit starts, but these have been a heavy lift. So as it stands now, I think the majority would be completed before the next audit starts, which is July 2023, right? That's your FY24 performance audit. And some of them related to the transportation performance framework that you'll be hearing about as part of the next item may take a little bit longer till maybe that audit concludes. And the reason for that is, we were waiting for the regional plan adoption. And Grace has been making, and her team, when they present, you'll see all the progress they have been making, which is substantial. Now we are, as an agency, working on an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, I think is what it stands for. And so I think the schedule for that has us, it's about 18 months out, I think. So we're taking a fresh look, modernizing our existing systems, economizing and making updates so that we are more efficient. That TPM framework ties into the implementation of that ERP. So again, and I have the experts here on the ERP. I'm no expert on that, but yeah, so.
Okay, very good. All right, we're looking forward to seeing the completed product on that one. All right, item number 14, Transportation Performance Management Framework update, and Ms. Mino is going to give that update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
ITALK Chair and committee members. Good to see you in person.
Same here.
My name is Grace Mino. I'm a principal research analyst here at SANDAG. Last time this item was brought to you, it was October 14, 2020. So I'll be giving a quick refresher in case people do not recall the background and context to this, but thank you, Ariana, for providing where we're at. And so I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So just to give a quick overview on our presentation today, we'll just give some background and context. We'll go into why we're going to be doing a transportation performance management framework, the overall goals, SANDAG's TPM goals for this. We had contracted with a consultant, Kimley Horn, and I will go over their study methodology. And then we will also go over the overall TPM framework for SANDAG, the recommendations that came out of Kimley Horn's report, and then where we're at with the implementation of TPM here at SANDAG. So quick background and context. Back in the 2018 triennial audit, there was about 40 total recommendations from that report, and 28 of them related to performance management. And so from that report, the 2018 performance audit, they had told us to establish a performance framework in order to set our performance targets, capture performance outcome data, conduct a robust cause and effect analysis, align reports with TransNet goals, consider additional resources, examine third-party data, and improve our existing goals, or tools, I'm sorry. So why TPM? Well, the Federal Highway Administration defined TPM as a strategic approach that uses transportation system performance information to inform investment and policy decisions. And so we wanted to ensure that we were linking this to project benefits, that there was a coordinated effort for reporting. We just wanted to show the need for accountability and enhance transparency, and then also to improve funding opportunities. So SANDAG's overall TPM goals, recognizing that we needed one within the agency, we wanted to obviously address the fiscal year 2018 audit recommendations. We also wanted to improve performance monitoring internally, and we wanted to strengthen the agency's desire to be a data-driven organization. And also, one of our major goals as an agency is to be a technologically forward organization, both internally and externally. And as being stewards of taxpayer monies, we also want to demonstrate transparency and clarity. So we had contracted with Kimley Horn. This happened during the pandemic. They conducted a 14-month study, and they did an inventory of existing performance activities that were happening within our agency. They also conducted OWP should be overall work performance owner interviews. So any projects that were tied with funding, they had conducted owner interviews within our agency. They had surveyed 12 local stakeholders, and they've met with 4 peer agencies. And so the overall performance framework for SANDAG is the drivers for this was obviously the audits. Also, we have existing mandates that happen both at the state and federal level, and obviously also our regional plan. This helps push our framework. There's also work activities that happen. So we have monitoring, planning, and then program and project delivery. And so in order to have all of this happen, we needed to establish a strong framework. And so the recommendations that came out of Kimley Horn's report was address audit recommendations. They also suggested that we update requirements to include congestion and mobility on arterial roads, safety, pavement, and vehicle miles traveled, to conduct consistent before and after studies, to research private data or third-party data, and also to do a consolidation of our data collection and reporting. And so I wanted to also share with you the update that's been happening on the recommendations. And so prior to Kimley Horn starting this, working for us and doing the study, we had already moved all performance monitoring under one department, and right now it's under our data science department in our applied research division. State of the commute was the home that was identified that where the new metrics could be added into. And so the last state of commute in 2020, we had added bike miles, bike counts, and also data on services that were for the elderly. We've worked closely with the ITALC State of the Commute subcommittee to notify about like where we're at as far as progress and changes and revisions that needed to be made to the state of the commute. We've also been working internally really hard to create interim dashboards for the metrics that were recommended from the audit recommendations, which were safety, bridge, and pavement. Those are not live yet, but we are working on those internally. And we're using federal or national databases that have data for San Diego County as an interim. This has been mentioned many times, but we do have a big data vendor pilot project that's happening with modeling and research staff. We've been researching vendors like Replica and Streetlight. And the thing with big data vendors is sometimes a lot of them approach SANDAG saying they have this big data and they can give us this type of data. I can say for one, we've been approached that some of the big data vendors have parking data or they have commercial vehicle data. But then when we do a deep dive into what they're actually providing for us, it's not necessarily to the level that we need it at for the region, or we don't have the exact details. And so we want to be very careful when it comes to selecting a big data vendor that they're actually providing the data that's going to be useful and give us the level of detail that is needed to be able to report this out to both our committees and to the public. We also did a survey to the jurisdictions and grant recipients on performance metrics and tools that they use. We wanted to get a lay of the land to see what's being collected locally and also what kind of tools they are using and to see if there's any uniformity or any kind of consistency. So that survey was completed and we got our last result on Monday. So we will begin analyzing those results. And then we're reconsidering revamping the methodology for calculating vehicle miles traveled. We're waiting for the California Air Resource Board to provide that guidance. And as Ariana had mentioned, with our resource planning, our enterprise resource planning, I'm sorry, I missed that E, the ERP. And then also we have another effort happening parallel to that, which is the open data portal. They both go hand in hand because the data that it gets collected from the ERP will be spit out through our open data portal so that it is accessible. There will be dashboards available so that the data is easy to read and that we are showing transparency and clarity. And that is it. Is there any questions?
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Mino. Are there any public comments on this item?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay. Any members of ITOP? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Hopper.
Thanks for the update, Grace. And I know you've said this to us before, but I'm going to ask for a couple of clarifications just because I forgot. Could you explain what the state of commute info bits are again?
Yeah, the state of the commute, it's an annual report that's required by the TransNet ordinance. Every year we have to produce the state of the commute report. And you were on the ITOP
I know.
subcommittee.
Just what were the info bits?
Oh, I'm sorry. So instead of, historically, they were long 40, 50-page reports. We've shortened those reports now down to the info bit so that it's only a few pages.
Okay.
Yeah, and you will be receiving an invite in the next few days for the subcommittee to meet and review. We had both Caltrans and our transit operators review the draft, and we're incorporating that feedback now, and you will be receiving a meeting invite plus a draft of that state of the commute prior to us meeting.
Perfect. And then I probably asked you this last time as well, but could you give an example of the big data vendors?
Yeah, so Replica is one that we're evaluating, and then also Streetlight. So some of the components that we're looking for, there's a wide variety, but some of it, because the licenses with a big data vendor is not cheap. Sometimes it's about $800,000 a year just to have a license to be able to use their platform and extract data, depending on the license that you agree to with them. But we are evaluating if we can get local streets and roads, like the arterial counts, the arterial traffic counts and volumes and speed. We want to ensure consistency. We want to ensure that that data is very reliable if we bring it in-house.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr.
One of the recommendations I think Kimberly Horn had was to update reporting, and I'm assuming that's reporting that the cities and the county will provide to SANDAG. Is that accurate?
Oh, update reporting tools, was that?
Yeah,
yes.
I believe that was it.
So in long-term big picture with our enterprise resource planning tool, there is an open data finance piece to that, and we're hoping that we will be able to provide a web-based login for the jurisdictions to be able to report in their finances plus their metrics into that reporting tool.
So that has not yet been implemented?
Not yet. We are in the very early stages of both our ERP and our ODP, but again, long-term big picture, we hope to have that implemented, train jurisdictions, have it implemented spring 2024 as a full execution, like fully executed. But again, within SANDAG, our ERP and our ODP have about an 18 to 24 month timeline to get it all up and running. That's including designing, specifications, getting everyone internally trained, and then also, having to train the local jurisdictions. And so, yeah.
I'm realizing with some of these dates, that these things are going to be done after I'm gone, and
you can still listen in.
Very good. Anything else? Yes.
In Kimberly Horn's interaction with other MPOs, did they run across programs that dealt with traffic signal performance measures?
I'm sorry, what was it? Traffic?
Signal.
SPM, signal performance measures? And I know there are several MPOs who have very well developed programs to analyze traffic through their traffic signal data. Our ability to get data out of the traffic signals has changed considerably in the last, say, 5 years. And it's not level of service based. It's just, like you say, big data coming back through your traffic signal controllers. And this would be a place to put something like that. And it looked like that was a big component of their study, was to interview these other MPOs and agencies. And I was just wondering if they had got feedback and rejected it or not.
I'm not sure about that specific traffic signal performance, but I can look back and get back to you on that one. When they had interviewed our local peer agencies, it was more about what they had in-house about how they monitor performance monitoring. So, but I'd be happy to get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. So when you did talk to the local agencies for feedback, did they provide other things that they thought it was important to have? I think this ability to automate the reporting is a big deal because I've heard of it, heard it in the past, but was there anything else that they thought should be part of this process?
So we asked about what tools would be helpful. So like uploading photos, being able to receive or provide invoicing quarterly. And so again, we got our last survey on Monday. So as soon as we analyze that data, I'd be happy to provide you a quick summary of what the results were.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And then, as Kimley Horn did their feedback and analysis with different agencies, is there one agency that maybe was really using a good tool that came up on the top?
So a few had, MTC has a Street Saver program for pavement, and we were looking into investing into Street Saver if that was something that was needed for our local jurisdictions. Again, once we analyze the data and we can see how the different jurisdictions are collecting their pavement data, that might be one system we may invest in. Though, again, if our ERP and our ODP can handle the same functions as Street Saver, then it would probably be a better cost savings for us to use our ERP versus purchasing Street Saver, because I believe the Street Saver license was maybe about $500,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no one agency has pretty much everything that we are looking to have here.
No, I think everyone has different bits and pieces that they offer as far as like how they capture their data, but I don't think everyone has it all under one house, which is what we're trying to establish here.
Oh, you'll be the trendsetter then. Once it's done. So speaking of once it's done, what's the timeline? What do you anticipate? We'd love to hear more details. An excellent presentation, by the way, but would like to hear more about what's going to actually be the program.
So long-term big vision, or long-term process is that we have all the metrics that was suggested from the 2018 triennial performance audit. I mean, I would love everything to be electronic and on a dashboard so that everybody can just see themselves, and that we're, they don't always have to be requesting data from staff. They can actually, sorry. So yeah, long-term big picture is to implement everything through the ERP, push it out so that it's on our Sandag website, and anybody can download the data or view it via a data dashboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that you would phase something, maybe start with parts of the program and then?
Oh, yes, and we're
add to
doing
it?
that now. So some of the new metrics are being added to the State of the Commute report.
Okay.
Some of those are there, but again, that's just an annual report. And
Yeah.
so some of the metrics are being housed there. We are also, again, like I said, working on data dashboards for safety, bridge, and pavement. So once those are live, we would be happy to share that with you.
Okay.
And then once we've selected a big data vendor, that's another area that we would love to share with you, so you know how we will be monitoring traffic on arterial roads.
Thank you, Ms. Mino. We're
Yeah.
looking forward to future presentations as well. So, okay, let's move on to item number 15, which is revised FY 2022 apportionment and 23 TransNet program. And Ariana's back. This is going to be Ariana and Jim.
Jim's going to
Miller.
kick it off.
Okay.
I'm back.
You're back.
I think you'll be seeing me next month too. So there's a little sneak preview. This is economic conditions I'm going to start with, but pretty much related to our TransNet revenues. And the headline is that COVID is still controlling the economy, and the war in Ukraine has a factor or two. Real GDP growth was 5.7 in 2021. That's independent of inflation, above inflation. So that was the strongest since 1984, and a healthy rebound after our COVID-related dip of 3.4% in 2020. The Philadelphia Fed surveys professional forecasters, and they expect a 3.7% real growth in 2022. The labor market also saw significant upheaval due to COVID, with unemployment peaking at about 16% in April of 2020. We're back down now to 3.6 nationally and about 4.7 in San Diego, which is almost where we were pre-COVID. So that's good news as well. Additionally, employers have record job openings right now, and we've seen a large wave of resignations as employees find better opportunities elsewhere, including a lot here at Sandag. We've lost a lot of employees, but we're hiring as well. Wages are also rising, especially for lower income workers, which is, where we'd really like to see some wage growth. So with the economy growing robustly and everyone who wants a job having one, why is everyone so unhappy? Well, the answer is inflation, which grew at 8.5% in the last 12 months, which is the highest in about 40 years. And a lot of that was concentrated in things that we buy a lot of, like food and gasoline. Gasoline went up 50% in the last 12 months. And that has an outsized impact on the way people view inflation, because even though gasoline expenditures tend to be about 2% of every household's expenditures, the price of gasoline is advertised on every street corner. So it really impacts people. You stand there at the pump and it goes ding, ding. Well, it doesn't go ding anymore, but it really impacts the way people feel about inflation. And it also impacts their bottom line. It is also by far, like I said, we haven't had inflation like this in 40 years, but over the last 20, we've really gotten used to very low inflation, 1% to 2% a year. So it's really impacting people. The Philadelphia Fed survey that I mentioned of forecasters, they are forecasting some lingering inflation in 2022 of about 3.8%, but that's still twice what we are kind of used to seeing. Housing costs have also spiked about 20% here in the region over the last year, which adds to difficulties for families. And construction costs have risen about 10%, which can impact Sandag construction projects. So inflation is being caused by both supply and demand factors. On the supply side, we have kinks in basically every link in our supply chain. We have production problems particularly in the East, in China. You have they're pursuing a zero COVID policy, which is causing shutdowns in Shanghai now. So that impacts production. Global shipping is in turmoil right now. And once those ships actually make it to the ports, especially here on the West Coast, the ports are very congested. Ships are waiting offshore for sometimes weeks. The ports themselves are very full. And once the goods get out of the ports, there's a shortage of truck drivers and of warehouse workers. So basically every part of the supply chain is messed up. On the demand side, COVID has kind of shifted consumer behavior away from services and travel towards goods, goods that need to be produced and shipped. We stopped going out to eat a lot, and we beefed up our home gyms and offices. And also we had the money to do that because of a lot of generous federal programs over the COVID. We had stimulus payments, enhanced unemployment, child tax benefits, deferred rent, and student loan payments. So we had some extra money to spend, and people really spent it. And this wasn't just limited to consumers, by the way. Businesses built up inventories over the last year because they foresaw these supply chain difficulties. So when they had the opportunity, they really ordered more than they did. So it was kind of analogous to the great toilet paper run of April 2020, when people bought everything in sight. Businesses have kind of been doing that because they're worried about their supply chains. So you have supply down, demand way up, you get inflation. The Federal Reserve is taking a very hawkish stance on this inflation, and they've raised rates once already in March, and they're planning to do that several more times throughout the year. Wall Street's expecting a 50 basis point rise in May. They're also pursuing quantitative tightening, which is they're getting some stuff off their balance sheets, which could press down asset prices. But they're hoping to slow the economy, tame that inflation without putting us into a recession. Raising finances, raising interest rates increases the cost of borrowing, which could include for Sandag, although I'm told by our finance department that we don't have a lot of exposure to that. And in fact, we hold money in reserve that could benefit from higher interest rates. COVID impacts are also being seen in Sandag revenues like TransNet and TDA funds. So after a flat 2020 and a 9% increase in FY 2021, so far in FY 22, which began last July, we've seen over a 20% increase in TransNet revenues. So to off balance the bad news we gave you earlier, there's a little bit of good news that at least in the short term, we're seeing quite a big jump. Incidentally, despite the higher rates of inflation, we estimate that over 80% of that real increase is not due to higher prices, but actually higher spending. So it really is a true rise in revenues. And with that spike, we are revising upwards our FY 2022 forecast, anticipating a 20.9% jump in revenues for the fiscal year as a whole. For next year, FY 23, starting in July, we're forecasting a much slower growth of 5%, with the expectation that buying patterns and inflation will revert to something closer to a pre-pandemic normal. This is an intentionally conservative forecast, though it still pretty much gets us back to where we were, what we were expecting pre-COVID. Sandag, as I mentioned before in the previous presentation, we employ a two-step forecasting method. In the short term, basically this year and next year, is based on professional judgment of the Sandag economic and finance teams. We look at receipts, the forecasts that we get from our vendors, and short-term economic conditions. And then the long term, from 2024 onward to 2048, is a consensus of 3 outside vendor forecasts for per capita retail sales that we apply to the Department of Finance forecast for population. This methodology was approved by a peer review process in 2021 that included Sandag staff and outside experts. And this specific forecast was put through the Sandag internal QA/QC process to ensure that there were no errors in the spreadsheet model and that the methodology was being followed appropriately. And I'll turn it back to Ariana now. Do we have a slide, Ariana?
No, I don't think we do, but I think you covered pretty much everything, but we were here in February. We brought you a revision to the FY22 TransNet forecast, as well as the FY23 through 27, I think it is. And so we're back again because despite the pandemic, revenues are still coming in significantly higher. So this is an opportunity for us to revise the estimates for FY22 and FY23. And, these estimates allow Sandag and our partner agencies to plan for capital projects and determine operating subsidies, because we also update the TDA forecast. And then in your report, we provide an attachment with the estimate for the overall TransNet program. It includes a breakdown by sub-program. The revision means that anticipated revenues for fiscal year 22 are now about 404 million, and for FY23 about 424 million. That's just the TransNet piece. Again, just to reiterate, while the short term looks rosy, long term we still have the funding shortfall. We still have to continue working toward addressing that challenge. We're going to the Transportation Committee this Friday with this information, and then the board for approval next week. And then we would release the estimates to the transit and the local agencies for their planning and programming use. And that's all we have to share with you today. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you, clerk. Questions from ITOC members? No? I just have a quick question, and I don't know if you have the answer or not, but with all this increase in gas prices, is there an uptick on transit ridership? Have you seen that? Is there numbers, percentages, or?
What I've heard is that transit ridership is up
Yes.
significantly because of the cost of fuel, but that's
Is that
all I know.
a little bit of an increase in funding or revenue, at least for the transit agencies? Is that something significant enough to put a dent in some of the funding shortfalls?
I don't know the answer to that one.
What I understand is that transit ridership is going up, but it was so gutted during COVID that we're still not back to what the ridership was prior to COVID. We're still working to get back up to that level, but it is going up, which
But
is
your
a good sign.
forecast included a lower ridership. Now we're seeing an increase, so I'm not sure if the forecast will change or not based on that.
Yeah, I think the forecast is more based on the revenue that's coming in from the sales tax.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Our last item on the agenda is the next meeting, which is going to be May 12th at 9:30. At this point, we're not sure if we're meeting in person or not. I would love to come back and see everybody here in the room. It's just so much easier to conduct and see everyone. So, okay, with that, are there any final comments? Any other questions? Anything else before we adjourn? No?
May 11th?
I'm sorry, May 11th or 12th on my agenda?
Yeah,
agenda
that's a
said-
typo.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's May 11th, which is a Wednesday.
We're coming in on Thursday.
Thank
No.
you for the correction.
Yeah, so May 11th, but June 14th is a Tuesday.
Yes. What do I know? I only go by the agenda.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you, everyone. May 11th is when we see you next. Thank you. We're adjourned.